Welcome to Leadership Lessons from the Fastlane, brought to you by the Washington Speakers Bureau. In this space, we will explore some of the most pressing challenges that leaders face today with the world's most respected, innovative, curious, and accomplished thought leaders. We'd like to welcome our host, best-selling author and co-author of the recently published book, Choose Love, Not Fear, a WSB exclusive speaker for almost 30 years, Gary Heil.
This is Leadership Lessons from the Fastlane. I'm Gary Heil. Today, I'm excited to have Mark King, the CEO of Taco Bell, with us. To know Mark King is to know what it looks like when you have a passion for people and a passion for innovation. To know Mark King is to know what it looks like and what you can achieve when you capture the creative imagination of a team. When Mark was the CEO of TaylorMade Addidas Golf, his team innovated in ways that caused the company to grow 6 times in revenue and become the largest and most profitable company in golf. As the president of North America of Addidas, he brought that same innovative enthusiasm to Addidas, and within 5 years, they tripled revenue and doubled market share. And today, Mark brings that enthusiasm to Taco Bell, where he's preparing the company to deal with customers, franchisees, and employees that promise to be different in the future. Mark, welcome. Good to see you again.
Gary, I love the intro. Thank you so much. And it's just really great to be with you, Gary. It's great to be on the program with you.
Well, thanks, Mark. You know, I was thinking about where to start, and I thought it appropriate to start that whenever you talk about innovation, pretty quickly the whole talk turns to customers. And I've been surprised over the years of how much we assume we know about customers that we really don't know. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I think, Gary, in whatever business I've been in, I think there's usually a disconnect between what you think customers desire and want and need and what you actually want them to desire, want, and need. But I think it's in some ways it's almost more fundamental than that. I don't think a lot of consumers actually know themselves what they want. And they go along and they do what they do. Their behaviors are their behaviors, whatever, if they're golfers or if they're hikers or whatever. And they only know what they know. And so I think part of the responsibility of a brand is to enlighten their own consumer into what is possible. So I think there's an avenue there worth discussing. But to me, the biggest example of we didn't know our customers, and you were a part of this back in 2010, there was this belief that a golfer, when I was at the TaylorMade company, would only play a driver that was painted black. And all of the research that we had said that only real golfers would only play a black driver. Well, we ended up in 2011 launching a white driver, and we went from 30% market share to 50% market share overnight, all the while finding out that what consumers really wanted was something new and different and exciting that piques their curiosity. So I think we all think we know what the consumer wants, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure we do.
You know, it's really kind of interesting how different the white driver was, to use that example. And sometimes we think innovations are small changes, which they are, but consumers sometimes don't jump for small changes when they get into a rut. I mean, it has to be substantial enough, but not so substantial that it scares them a little bit. How do you draw that line?
Well, I think this might sound wrong, but I think you have to pique the curiosity of consumers with the hope that whatever it is that you're selling or marketing is something new and different. Because I think we live in an age now where incremental improvement is okay, but it's not really what our customers want. Our customers want something that is a quantum leap, and they're looking for that. And I think there's been a real change in mindset of customers where, hey, it was okay just to be incremental, but if I'm going to change, I want to change for something big and different. And we had that experience at Addidas. That brand was flat, Gary, for 20 years, 1995 to 2015. And we brought in Kanye West, who was a hip hop star and a rapper, and we gave him complete creative authority to do whatever he wanted with a pair of athletic shoes. And what he did was he took the Adidas logo and the Adidas markings off the box, off the shoe, which was a completely radical. We're now selling an Adidas product with no Adidas marking on it. But it was such a radical departure from an Adidas shoe. To this day, it's the largest franchise that Adidas has. So I do think the customer is looking for new, innovative things that kind of changes the way they look at things.
When we used to study customer loyalty, one of the things we found was that customers were more likely to shift and be loyal when we made an emotional connection with them. And somehow connecting emotionally is not easy with certain products, but you've been able to do that a couple times.
Yeah, I think customers really, it's math and magic. And the math to me is more logic. So it's logic and magic. And the magic for me is that hope that a customer has that there is something better out there. And I think you have to dial into that. I remember, and I don't know if you were at this meeting or not, but I stood in front of our sales force with a club in my hand. And I said, you know what makes our clubs different? Our employees give these clubs a heartbeat. They give it something, they give it this feeling and emotion. And when we can tie that feeling and emotion to our customers, because that's what they want. They don't want a piece of metal with a graphite shaft and a rubber grip. That's not what they want. They want something that they can emotionally get attached to. And when you speak about your products that way, I think that resonates with the customer.
I do. There is this magic about feeling. I used to think that when you walk into a company, I still think it, that when you walk into a company, or whether it's a junior high school or TaylorMade Adidas Golf or Adidas, in general, you walk into any organization, you can feel the difference in a company. You can feel whether people are engaged. You can feel whether they're innovative. You can feel whether they're authentic. You can feel the difference, can't you? There's an emotional feeling when you walk through the door. Do you still believe that?
Gary, I was retired, and you know that. I stepped down after many, many years of selling products and leading companies, and I was going to try to share what I learned through giving speeches and playing a little more golf with you and some of my friends. And Yum Brands asked me if I would be interested in the running and being the CEO of the Taco Bell brand. And I really wasn't, because I didn't know anything about food or franchisees or restaurants. It's not what I'd spent my life doing. And so I met the CEO of Yum here where I am today in this building. And Gary, the minute I walked in the front door, and as I'm telling this story right now, I'm getting goosebumps, because you could feel the electricity, you could feel the passion, you could feel the belief that we can change people's lives with a taco. I mean, it completely changed my perception of the industry, of what we do, and it was because of this feeling inside of this building. And I think if you don't have the feeling inside the building, it's hard to translate it to your customers. And I know you would probably say this. When you walked into the TaylorMade building between the year of 2004 or 5 and 2014, there was a feeling there, no matter if it was Robin at the front desk or Jeffrey at the front desk or Benoit in R&D or Sean with putters. There was just this feeling. And I think that's what separates, really extraordinary companies from good companies.
Well, I certainly can attest that I could feel it from the minute I walked in, and I was captured by it, because I do believe that before anybody opens their mouth, there's an energy to a great company that you can feel. And when you walk in and see one like that, it's the interesting question for me. We spend in North America about $16 billion a year trying to create better leaders. And on average, we're not 1% better over the last 2 decades. And yet in some companies like that, where you can feel the difference, a lot of that magic has got to be in the culture that leaders create. How do you hire? How do you find? How do you evaluate leaders that are more likely to pull that off?
Well, I'd like to have a little chunk of that 16 billion, to be honest with you. I think for me, Gary, it's been an evolution and a lot of mentors like yourself that help me understand what makes a company great. And I think it starts with that. And what makes a company great is the culture, or I'll use a different word, it's the environment. And environments that create that kind of energy are ones that all of the people feel like they're a part of moving the company forward. They just don't have a job. They're part of the company. And I think that's the leadership skill that actually doesn't really translate to many leaders. And I have my own theory on that. And my theory is this. There's a lot of you get hired because we think you're good for the job. You get promoted because you're a really good doer. You then get promoted to manager because you're really organized and planful, and you can follow up and set KPIs and give feedback. And then you get promoted to a leader, or as you get more as you go up the ladder, leadership becomes more important than management. But really what we've been trained at is doing and managing, not inspiring others to do great things. And so I don't know about the number of $16 billion, but I don't know that that's a really easily teachable characteristic, is to say, hey, Gary, your success is going to be on how much you inspire others to do extraordinary things. How do you do that? Well, it's different with every person. And so to me, leadership is more of an art than it is a science. And so when I interview someone, to get back to your question specifically, for a leadership role, if they're talking KPIs, if they're talking control, if they're talking incremental improvement, I think they're going to be a great manager. I don't think they're going to be a great leader. If I interview people and they talk about emotional things, or chasing extraordinary, or doing something out of the ordinary, and just the language that they use, you can get the sense that this person is going to inspire others to do great things. And so it's taken me a really long time, in fairness, to be able to identify, will this person be a great leader? And then if you're 50-50, I think you're pretty darn good. You're a Hall of Famer. So I think leadership is the most challenging part of being in a business, is to be a leader. A manager, I think you can actually train management skills pretty effectively. I think leadership is about your heart. It's about loving others. You just wrote a book about leadership's about love. And the more I'm in these jobs, the more it's about love. I mean, you really hit a chord with that book. And it's a hard one, but when it's right, it's really powerful. You do extraordinary things.
One of those things that we don't talk about near enough, about why we get, why we don't get. And you talk about the language and it's sort of the language being a window to our soul a little bit, because it is in a way, is what we think of others. When I met you, when you meet extraordinary leaders who are doing interesting things and creating that kind of energy, there's a belief that ordinary people are capable of doing extraordinary things. It's one thing to say we're going to do extraordinary, and then there's another thing to believe other people are really capable of treating them like that. I wonder if we believe to our soul many times that ordinary people really are capable of extraordinary.
Gary, I think that's, I don't know how long we're going to talk, but that question gave me goosebumps. And I'll tell you why, because I think our institutions, our higher institutions, really educate people to think that intellect is superior to almost anything. And I've worked for many bosses that if you didn't have the right pedigree, go to the right universities, you probably weren't capable of doing extraordinary things. Well, I barely went to college. I'm not even sure I graduated. And my experience between 2000 and 2010, and you were a part of that, was a bunch of golf guys that did just an extraordinary thing. And we changed the industry. We changed the construct of the industry. We brought innovation. We brought speed. We changed so many fundamental things for one core reason. We believed we could do it. We didn't know how, we didn't know the path. We just believed because we loved what we were doing. We loved the category. We loved the people in the building, that if we just came together and shared this common vision for doing something really extraordinary, and we talked about it, let's be extraordinary. How? I don't know, but let's go figure it out together. And we engaged people, and you were a part of that. So I'm a believer that intellect is probably the least common denominator of doing extraordinary things. It's obviously you have to be of a certain intelligence to be able to connect dots and do things. But I think there's a belief that some people have, that if you have it, you can do great things. I end my speeches with this little beginning of this prayer, and the beginning, and that first two lines is, our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. And I think if you believe you can do great things and you're not fearful, it's possible. I'm not saying you will do it, but it's possible.
Well, I think that's the whole fundamentals of expectancy theory. The idea that what I expect is what I get. It's not that you change my ability, it's that you change my belief in myself, that I think I can all of a sudden do the extraordinary. And I think that's key. And the one other point, Mark, you made there that I've seen in just a few places in my career, which is this time when a management team, or a team in general, not just the management team, gets together and they have a passion so much for what they're doing that almost every conversation isn't work. They're almost like their customers. It's like their customers are sitting there talking about whether we should have a white driver.
Gary, I don't know if you're following the Mexican pizza at Taco Bell, but last week we launched a product called the Mexican pizza. It's been around since 1985. And we took it off the menu during COVID because it had a lot of different ingredients. It's the long build times. So we were trying to simplify the menu. Got a lot of heat. We averaged about 20 pizzas a day. We just relaunched it. We have sold 20 million pizzas in 10 days. 20 million pizzas in 10 days. And it's been magical. No one could, we just announced today, that's what we had everyone on the call today. We announced that we're sold out. And we had a year's supply. We sold out in less than 10 days. But if you would have been here, my point that I'm trying to get at is the people that have been here, the president of the company, he's been telling me for weeks, he said, I can smell what's about to happen because they live it every day. It's in their veins. It's what they think about. It's what they dream about, is this business of Taco Bell, the customers, the franchisees, the product, how it all comes together. And those are things that I think logical managers struggle with because there's no way you can predict that. It's about expectancy. It's possible if we do the right things. It just unlocks so many things you can't predict. And I've been a part of this 2 or 3 times now. And so I actually think there's a formula to it, right? I mean, there is and it starts with, do you believe? And Gary, you met Herbert Heiner, my boss for 16 years at Addidas. When I first took the job in 2000, this is what he said to me. Now, TaylorMade hadn't grown in 10 years. 10 years when I took the job. He said, Mark, if you can't grow the business, I will fire you within the next 3 years because we're a publicly traded company. If you can't grow, I have to find somebody else who can. That moment in time for me said, I have to grow. So that wasn't a debate. There's no debate here. I'm not losing my job. We're going to grow. And so it changed the way I looked at, if it's not working, we have to change it. But it was a belief system that we could grow. And the story. I mean, we had 56 consecutive quarters of growth in an industry that during that time was declining. So extraordinary stuff happens, but it happens first. You have to believe it. You have to expect it. And then you have to be willing to have the courage to do new and different things.
Yeah, I termed a coin a long time ago that I believe that I saw in those days, and I called it celebrated discontent. And by what I meant is that it took enough time to celebrate our successes on the way up, but we were still kind of discontent that we weren't getting better faster. And some people think they're opposites, and they're not. I want to be really discontent, and I want to be really happy and celebrating. And one of the things we don't do, sometimes we're discontent plenty, but one of the things we don't do is celebrate. One of the things that was remarkable for me when in TaylorMade, when you were there, was watching the team prepare for that great Olympic event of the air guitar competition. I'm having meetings, and people had to get off early because they could miss the meeting, but the air guitar competition was beyond it. And I've never seen people, only at Disney, only in a few places in my career, have I seen people celebrate as much the successes on the way up. That had to be somewhat by design.
Yeah, I don't know if it was by design. I'd like to say I was, a little bit more planful, but I think when you let things go for the general employees, they create things that you as a leadership team could never create. I do not know where the idea of that competition came from, but it became the most legendary event of the year for us, and every employee singing and dancing and costumes and the energy and the celebration. And you saw that. But I think that comes when you say to employees, make this a cool place. You make it a cool place. What does that look like? I don't know cool, right? I mean, I got a blazer on, right? Blazers are not cool, Gare. We've got them, gray hair and blazers. That's not cool. And I just want to tell you something that's really, it's eerie. Halloween here at Taco Bell is a full day event. When I got here, I looked at the budget. I don't even want to say, I don't know who's going to watch this, but it was a lot of money, way more than we should be spending on a Halloween celebration. And you know what they do at the Halloween celebration? They do the same thing we did at TaylorMade. All of the departments, they sing and dance in costumes, and there's competitions. It's exactly the same day. And the environment here and what this brand has done over its 60-year history is very similar to TaylorMade. Disruptive and new and different, and always, think outside the bun and all of these really cool things. But I think it's because the people have been unlocked, if you would, to just be who they are and create really cool things. And that's when I think this energy starts to really grow. For me, being from Wisconsin, to me, energy is about like a snowball going downhill. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the bigger that energy force gets, the more amazing things you do. And I know for most managers, you can't really quantify what I just said, but it's really true. And I actually think you can manage that, right? I think you can institutionalize that, if you will.
I think joy begets more joy, and more fear begets more fear. And it's when I think about what you said about the air guitar and the Halloween stuff, there is a part to it that I think you said that I'd like to emphasize a little, because I think it's so true. Had you come up with the idea of the air guitar or the celebration for Halloween, and some manager would have said, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have an air guitar competition. We probably had 2 entrants, you and me. But because the team did it, and the team's included, and it's the team's idea, and the team is authentically creating something they feel, it's fundamentally different, isn't it?
It's the whole thing, especially in today's world, Gary. And you know this because you saw me, but I was a prototype command and control leader, manager, when I left the ranks of sales to be the leader of the company. And I had a lot of knowledge, wisdom, experience. I could see what was going to happen. And that's what leaders got paid for 20 years ago. And because we had success, a lot of people get excited about being there. But I could quickly see that I'm going to exhaust my knowledge, wisdom, and experience very quickly. And then when you couple that with the speed of change in the world, those types of leaders, managers become obsolete overnight. And so I've now spent the last 20 years of my life figuring out how do I just work on the environment? And the environment is, how do you engage people to think, challenge, experiment, and create? And the more you create that environment, the bigger breakthroughs you end up having. And honestly, it's a lot less stressful, on the 8 leaders to go off and say, okay, we got the same 8 people we had last year. We're going to have the same conversation. We're probably going to end up with the same result. So why are we even having this offsite other than to drink good wine and have a few rounds of golf? So I've really changed how I use my time and my knowledge, wisdom, experience, which is to get out of the way, really, because it's a new world today and it's all about the future, not about the past.
And the world's coming towards you, Mark. I'm dying to hear what you think, but the Gen Zers that are going to be and are taking over, and that have changed how we view videos from 2 minutes is now way too long, right? And how we look at advertisements and how we take our news and how we read or don't read information. The world that's coming, and if, I mean, what is it, Gen Z, or keep a job 2 years and 3 months now on average, right? Because they're not going to put up with some place that there is no energy,
right? Because
they like values and authenticity and purpose and things that are right up to the gospel that you're preaching. Isn't there a chance that we're even going to be pushed further that way by the very employees that are coming behind us to run companies and to become our success in the future?
Yeah, we're definitely in a transformation, Gary, right? I mean, millennials were the in thing till a year ago, and now it's Gen Zs. And even though they say there's a lot of difference, I don't really think there's a tremendous amount of difference there. I think there's a tremendous amount of difference between Gen Z, millennials, and baby boomers. I'll give you a really classic example right now. When COVID hit, we went home like everybody else and worked from home. Right? Well, all the baby boomers, me included, that's why I'm in the office today. We all want to come back. We want to come back Monday morning and work till Friday and work till 5, because that's what we know. That's what we're comfortable with. But that's what we know. That's the only way we're comfortable. We have an employee base right now that is saying, Mark, we're not coming back to the office, right? If you make us come back, we're leaving. And we know that because when we started to get ready to come back to the office, I said to the executive team, we're not going to figure out what the future looks like back to work. We're going to hand it off to 60 people. And we asked people to sign up. We got people from level 5 to level 14, and they created our new environment here at Taco Bell. And our executive team doesn't like it. But that's the future. They don't, because we are saying to people, if you want to move to Montana and take care of your mom and dad, work remotely. And it's a learning process, but that is the future. And I don't even know if it's the future, Gary. It's here, right? And I think the sooner leaders embrace that, figure out how to deal with it, and not that's the wrong way to say it, figure out how to accept it, the faster they're going to go, and the better their facility is going to be. We did an experiment. We posted a series of jobs. And in one ad, we said, we require you to be in the office 3 days a week. And the second piece was, we require you to be in the office 1 day a week. And the third was, you can work 100% remotely. I don't know the exact numbers, but the number of people that applied was 4 or 5 times bigger when you can work remotely than when you have to come to the office. These are all young people, all Gen Z, all millennials. So the world is changing right before our eyes today. And if you're going to have a great company, you have to embrace the values, the mindset, the behaviors of young people.
Well, think about how far it's changed already in just a few years, Mark, from the command and control kind of mindset that you talked about earlier to I'm not sure how I'm going to run the company. I think I'll leave it to 60 people to determine what the work week is.
No, Gary, I mean, think about that. And you know me, you know where I came from and where I am. But I mean, we are handing off more and more things to people. And what you find is that when you're not encumbered by knowledge, wisdom, experience, when you're not encumbered by the politics of making decisions, and you're just free to think about the right decision without any of the other consequences that I have to consider at some point, you come up with way better ideas. You just come up with better ideas. And that's how you lead today.
There is the other side of that challenge is really interesting, which is, how we do things here, or culture or environment, as you call it, is a very powerful. It really affects us in ways we don't even realize they affect us many times. But creating the kind of culture that you want to create or tend to create in the companies that you're in is going to be different in a work from home kind of environment where more and more people choose to be remote, isn't it? Aren't we going to have to do things a little differently to ensure that we create the same energy, esprit de corps with a remote workforce?
Well, yes, I think the answer to that is obviously yes. And I think if you left it to the senior leaders, they would not be capable of doing it because they don't look at the world the way these young people look at the world. So if you're going to create something new, you have to let them create it. I mean, honest to God, yesterday I had 33 people in a room and I said, hey, are you not afraid that working remote is you're going to lose this togetherness and this culture? I mean, I almost got shot down like, Mark, you don't understand. We can have an amazing culture connected online. And it's a world that I don't see because the only time you and I talk is when it's on the phone or in person playing golf. We don't go back and forth on LinkedIn and all these. I mean, that's their world. So if you look at the world through the lens that we grew up in, you'll never understand it, which is why senior leaders, that's not their role anymore. It's not their lens. It's the lens of young people.
And it brings me to one of the things I always admired when I watched you create cultures was the way that you, it's often called MBWA, management by walking around. I hate the term, actually. I love the term creating relationships, really, because when I watched you do it, there was a joy in walking around, which was awful, by the way, absolutely awful for the undercover boss, because you could be no more undercover at TaylorMade than anybody else could be. But when you sit there and you walk around, you were building relationships where sometimes walking around is almost like the policeman's walking around watching what we're doing. And on the other side, you had Mark King walking around creating relationships, which helped build the relationships, which allowed you to influence the company. But that also will be different, I would think, in the world we're moving to.
Yeah, it is. But I do think there will always be a place for physical get-togethers. I think the purpose of those physical get-togethers is probably different than it has been traditionally. Traditionally, it would be that's where the work is done. Now, I think it is where you still can form those relationships. So here, we've done all kinds of things in this very traditional building to bring people together. So when we have an all-employee meeting, we have free breakfast, free lunch, and drinks at 4:00. So people are coming in, and that. People are coming in. We give away T-shirts, and there's so many, and we've turned a lot of physical works areas into gathering areas where people can form relationships. So I do think there will always be a place for the physical get together, but the frequency and the purpose now, I think, is really around relationships. That's what I think.
And relationships, the research shows that almost all influence is relational. If we don't have a relationship, it's tough to influence people.
Gary, I was thinking about this as I was preparing. I have my own, so since I've met you, I had been with TaylorMade for many, many years when I took over running the company, but then I went to Addidas. And when I was at Addidas, I not only ran Addidas, but Reebok, CCM, which was all under the umbrella. And then I've come here to Taco Bell. So I've had 4 or 5 opportunities to go into groups where I'm their leader, and how do you lead them, right? And I learned this. This is my own formula. The first thing for me is, and you wrote about it in your book about love, and I use the word like, but I think as a leader, it's fundamental that people like you. This thing, no, they don't need to like you. They need to respect you. I know that as a manager, maybe, but as a leader, they have to fundamentally like you. Maybe they don't have to love you, but they got to like you. So I spend a lot of my time letting people like me. And for me, it comes almost natural. You've seen it, but to me, how do you get people to like you? Well, you tell them stuff. I walk the dog every day at 4:45. I go to sleep every night at 7 o'clock. What an amazing life my wife has, I mean, so I think if you can be human for them, because in a lot of cases, big leaders aren't human for the average employee. So I think like is a really big thing. And then I think they need to know who you are and what you value. And so for me, I value simplicity. I value growth. I value speed. I value people. Those are the only things I value. I think if you do that right, everything. And once they like you and they know you, you can ask them to do just about anything and they will. And I think if you skip those first two steps and you go in, and I saw that at Adidas when Herbert Heiner retired and the new guy came in and he was just, hey, I'm the boss, I'm the leader, you will follow me. And he went through some really tough times culturally, morale, people. He's done an amazing job on some things, but people don't follow him because he didn't think the first two were important. And to me, those are the most important. If people like you, if they know and understand you, they will follow you. And that's kind of the formula that I've used, and it's been pretty successful.
I totally agree with you. Being liked is totally underestimated part of leadership, because I don't know whether we said they need to respect you, not like you, because we weren't really well liked. but I totally agree with it. I want to get your comment on something. A friend of ours, Jill Ellis, who coached the women's national soccer team, says, you got to love them. She means, in the words, wish the best for them, even if they don't love you back. But she says, what's more important sometimes is that they really like each other, and that the people playing together have to really have a culture where they like each other, are willing to help each other. I want you to comment on that for me, because I think it's an interesting notion that you make tough decisions sometimes as a leader that they don't always love, but the fact that they like each other is important also.
I inherited a executive team here that they didn't love one another, they didn't like one another, they outwardly disliked one another. And I was forced to make some early changes, which I did. And then a couple of years later, with the new team, politics, individual careers, they end up not liking each other again, which is pretty typical of an executive team. But I just had an offsite and I said, look, here's one of my values. We like each other. If you can't like one another, you can't stay here. It's just that simple. Because if we don't like one another as an executive team, everyone in the building will know it. And it'll be okay not to like people. And that's not acceptable here. You can disagree with someone. You can actually have different values. But that's why we have diversity is such a powerful thing, because we have to like the fact that people are different than one another. I didn't know that 20 years ago. I mean, I came from white, Catholic, golf, conservative. We were all the same. Then I went to Adidas. There wasn't two people the same. But that's the value of that, is liking someone even though you're different. And I just don't think it's acceptable as a leader to not like. I don't like it, and I don't accept it. And there's very few things I don't accept, but that's one of them.
One last point about this. There's a study that was out for 7 or 8 years now, in which Jen Mueller did at Wharton, which said that we talk about loving, liking, respecting novel ideas. For a guy who's as innovative as you are, we like novel ideas. We rate them high. We think they're creative. We think they could be great. The problem comes, she says, is we have the study shows, we have a bias against them. When it comes to who we hire, we don't hire the novel person that creates instability, because to many of us, novel means risk, right? And there is risk in novelty, but we like stability more than we like to think we like stability. So when we choose somebody to be promoted, the button-down person wins the award, not the novel person. And you've created these amazingly innovative kinds of cultures that have done innovations. How do we get around that bias of, novelty not good?
Well, I think it fundamentally starts with what you value as a leader or the hiring manager, whatever person we're talking about, Gary. Because if what you value is stability, if what you value is incremental, You can talk all you want about, yeah, we need new ideas, we need innovation, but if what you value is being conservative, you're always gonna, you're not gonna go with the novel. You're just not. And that's why for me, I look at the world that we live in today. The world does not reward incremental. It doesn't reward conservative. It, it rewards big ideas, risk takers, maybe make a few mistakes along the way, new innovation. The world is moving so fast that if you're of the old model, you're not going to be successful. So I value new innovation through creativity, which leads to disruption. How do you get that? You have to have a diverse workplace. You have to engage people in thinking, and you have to, and I fundamentally ask them, if you want to look for new innovation, you don't have to look for new things. You just have to challenge what we do today. How could we do what we do today differently? If we could start over, would you do it the same way? No. Well, then let's talk about that. So to me, it's about what you value. And if your value, and I used to value those other things, I did, but I also realized that if I didn't change my values as it relates to business, I wasn't going to be successful as a leader in the year 2020. There's no way. So as a leader, you either need to adapt your values to what will work in today's world, or you're always going to hire knowledge, wisdom, and experience, and you're not going to move. You're going to go the wrong way. And Gary, you spend your whole life looking at industries. Every industry that's being disruptive is being disrupted by outside forces, not incumbents, not number two, not number three, but outside people coming in saying, I'm not encumbered by the infrastructure of the category. I can do this completely different. And they turn it upside down overnight. And there's just one story after another. So anyway, getting to your question, for me, that what you have to challenge is, if you want to hire the right people to move your business forward, you have to change what you value. Otherwise, you're going to hire the same people.
Well said. I can't say it better than that. Mark, three quick things for you. First, what are you reading?
Well, I'm now reading a lot of David Novak books, who's the former CEO of Yum, because he keeps sending me his new books. I read you, but I'll tell you what, Gary, I read James Patterson, which is not what you want to hear, because I love serial killers. I know there's maybe a sickness there that I have, but it's easy reading. But I've really fallen in love with Guy Raz as the podcast guy.
Yep.
He's got the show on leadership, and it's really fascinating to me. What
is.
I do is I really love to learn from others, not books, but like my relationship with you, or my relationship with a friend of mine, ours, that John Hamm, for whatever good, bad, or in between, there's a brilliance there that you learn from. So I like to, I'm not really an academic person, but I spend a lot of time with people and get from them. And I also, right now, I think the biggest learning comes from young people. So I spend most of my time with young people.
Mark, along those lines, don't you think that curiosity is a gift that is not as common as it needs to be? We just need to be curious.
It's the most important word in today's world, probably always has been, Gary. And had I not been, I'm not academically curious. Like, I don't really want to work to read about the war. I don't care about World War II and who was but I'm very curious about what's working today and who's doing it right, and and to me, if it weren't for curiosity, I'd still be at TaylorMade, which would be cool. But I've had so many bigger, bolder, amazing experiences, and I left the love of my life, and that was the TaylorMade company and all those people that I had grown up with. But right now, this job at Taco Bell is the most exciting, fulfilling job I've ever had, and it's only because I allowed myself to be curious about pushing myself to learn more about the world and how it operates, and how do you be successful in today's world.
Two leaders, Mark, living or dead, who most influenced your thinking or you most admired?
Oh, I would say that Muhammad Ali. I know that's a different answer than maybe you were looking for, but for his greatness in the ring, I think his greatness out of the ring was more inspiring than anything. So I would say him. Um, my living one might be a little controversial, but I want to put some context to it, and that's Elon Musk. And I say that because to me, he's just a big, bold, courageous thinker, and he's thinking about how do I change the world. Now, we may not like the way he's trying to change the world, so I'm not into that. But I love the fact that he is curious and he is big and he's about creating extraordinary things. So I would say those two people.
That's great. I'm going to be one of those young people. Boy, you can tell I'd have to change the color of my hair. And I come to you and I say, Mr. King, do you have just one piece of advice for me, just one piece that would shorten my trails? What have you learned that would, one thing you would leave me with?
Well, I got to give you the sequence of what I would give you, young Gary, and that is this.
Okay.
No matter what you hear and read about the world today, I would go back to be a young person today in a heartbeat. And I would, because I think the world is starting to find its real potential. And yes, we're going to go through some troubles for a while as we figure it all out. But the world right now is unlocking potential. When I was a kid, the potential was if you do a job for 30 years, you could end up a director, right? And so today the world has so many opportunities for those who are curious and those who are big, creative, bold people who are not afraid of failing. So just follow your passion, have courage, and just know that extraordinary is out there. It may not be where you think it is, but it's out there for you. And I don't know that we ever lived in a time where extraordinary was so attainable as it is right now, and it will be in the future.
You know what I love, Mark, about our conversations throughout the years is that it seems to me, as one of my friends likes to say, when you come to the fork in the road, you take the bold route. You very seldom take the compromising easy route. You take the bold route. And I thank you for your time this morning. I thank you for your lessons today. And on a personal note, I thank you for all the many lessons you've taught me over the last decade or so, Mark. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Gary. And the feeling is right back at you.
And I'd also like to thank the Washington Speakers Bureau for supporting these conversations that can help people find ways to build more inspired teams. And I thank you, those of you who are bothered to listen to us today. And I can only hope that you found one or two things you might think slightly differently about as you listen to Mark and I discuss our experiences. Thank you.